Hi, I'm Captain Larry Bell with Texas Fishing Tips. This is your weekly fishing report.
So we've had a pretty interesting week this week. So we finally had a week of super calm winds in the mornings all the way into early afternoons, and then they start to kind of pick up later in the afternoons, but still manageable. So it's been nice to have this different kind of wind. So with that said, up here, Ayers Dugout, Ayers Reef, second chain of islands, this area up in here, all this becomes to get trout hanging out on it, bait hanging out on it, lots of shell, lots of fish hanging around this type of structure right now in lots of different areas. So if you have an area that's got lots of shells, some deeper water accessible to it, you got bait working on it, these are one of the areas that you're going to want to target during your upcoming week or weeks to come. It doesn't look like we're going to get a break from our hot weather anytime soon, but we are having our low winds. So again, a few weeks ago it was 25 plus all day, every day. Now we're, below 10 all day long, so it's really nice to have that change of pace. But anyway, up here on Ayers Reef, a lot of bait working in this area here. Best bait that's been working for me this past week has been the burner shad and the original models. The super model has not been as productive for me. I'm working deeper edges with it and just seeing, but consistently the burner shads and the original down south has been the best and most productive. Again, Twisted Tea has been very good, very productive color. White Ice, Bone Diamond, Chicken of the Sea has all those colors have been really productive for me this past week in this particular area. Also, Double D has been good. Marker 54 jerk shrimp has been really good, both forward and backward. So if you like to use an artificial shrimp, which I would suggest the Marker 54 bait, because it is an extremely great bait to use, realistic, very durable, holds up. If you've had a bunch of ladyfish or skipjack hitting you over the last few weeks, which there's been plenty of, they'll clip the tails on those. So I've lost quite a few tails with my plastics, but when we're using that Marker 54 jerk shrimp, we even on those shots where the skipjack are hitting those, we're doing good with those. They're not able to clip those tails just because of the material that's being used in that particular product. So something to consider when you're buying that style of bait. Underneath popping cork, free lining it along this area here, along this edge. Work all this area. Work the shell, work it up shallow, work it up deep. There have been redfish that have been up in this area, lots of trout that are around this area, some few scattered in black drum. We haven't come across any flounder as of yet in this particular area, but I'm sure there are some. So work the guts, work the edges. Look for your bait working in here. Again, the majors and minors are a big deal, especially when these calmer conditions in play. I like personally for a 12 to 15 mile an hour wind to keep things moving, but when you have calmer winds like we have had, then work in areas where you've got some current being pushed around it with a little bit of wind or an incoming or outgoing tide makes a big difference, especially in calm conditions. So also make sure when you're working these particular areas, you're paying attention to water clarity, what's going on. Rule of thumb, said it before, say it again, say it over and over again. It's dark water, dark baits, light water, light baits. So translucents or darks. So those are things that you really need to pay attention to and take in consideration when you're having a color change or a color choice that you want to use. Double D has been very good. Crown Royal. There's a couple of other. The Gringo has been good in this darker water. That banging that thing down in on top of that grass or off the edge of that shell has worked really well. Especially with the amount of bait that we have in here, the right size bait too. I mean, we've got some 3, 4, 5 inch bait in there, so that Double D really mimics that. It's got a lot of flash on it, so when you really work the Double D into these areas, whether it be down the shell edge, deeper edge, over grass beds, all that kind of area, if these deeper guts up here off a rattlesnake, these areas here become really good, and that bait becomes very effective in that particular situation. So just remember, take those type of things. Again, we've got a new moon that's coming. Everything will be into play. Big baits, small baits, in between baits, whatever you like to throw, try it. If something's not working for you after you've worked for it for 40, 45 minutes to an hour, switch baits up, switch colors up, switch your size, profile size, everything. Switch all that stuff up and just see see what's going on. If you got multiple personnel with you and you have 3, 4, maybe 5 people that are fishing, you can get into different baits with each person, and y'all can locate and figure them out pretty quick that way. Again, use your majors and minors in here. You're working hard pack sand, shell, drops, edges. We've had low tides again, so these are wintertime tides that we've had that's been kind of in here like here. So they've been really low in the mornings, come back a little bit midday, and then start dropping back out again. So those are all things to be taken in consideration when you work certain areas. If you're not sure about that, make sure you pay attention to your tide reports. And one of the best one that's out there is 361fishing.com, so you can check with them if you'd like to. That's a great app that you can get for your phone, and it gives you quite a great amount of detailed information in lots of these areas that are up in here. But again, make sure you have the right baits with you, working different baits with you, especially with the new moon that's coming. Great amount of fish that are in here. Lots of small ones. You know, we're still catching lots of 13, 14, 15. Having to work a little bit for those that new slot 17 to 23. But they're there. There's some good fish that are hanging in that. So just continue to fish these areas. Be patient with these areas, and you'll locate your fish. Jaybird Point, Jaybird Reef. Again, all these areas that are up in here with all the reefs that are scattered around up here in the Spalding, Spalding Bight, Spalding Reef, Carlos, the Fingers of Carlos, all these areas here. These are areas of emphasis and areas that you really want to target during this time frame right now. There's lots of fish that's hanging out around shell. Over on Long Reef Bend, Paul's Mott, all those areas there, lots of shell in these areas up here. In Carlos, you've got shell bars, shell reefs, shell pads that are all over those particular areas up in there. All these are areas that you really want to look for. Down here in Spalding Bight, you've got the mouths of all these particular back lake mouths that go in here, and you got deeper guts. Again, with our lower tides that we've been getting over the last few days, you know, that water's really been dropping out. We have negative tides a few days, still getting a few negative tides here and there. So the deeper guts, the edges of shell bars that have a little drop off to them, those are something that you really want to pay attention to and to look at. All the hard packed sand that's on the outside of St. Joe up here, it comes all the way from Spalding all the way up to Jaybird. You got the back lake mouths, you got the entrances on both sides. Jaybird's mouth that goes up into that little back lake that's there. You've got deeper guts that are in there. So when these tides are really starting to fall out of here, look for those deeper guts to hold fish for you. Will every one of them hold fish? No. Not all of them are going to have fish in them, but you know, your starting point, which I've talked about before, is if you got some moving water, some type of either wind-driven or tidal-driven, whatever that may be for you for the case, whatever's going on at that particular time that you're fishing. Look for bait, work in those areas, and obviously the structure itself, the edges, the guts, the drops, the points that come up, pinch points. Those are areas that you really want to focus on and look for that are coming through where water can be pushed through or maybe it's being pushed around. And especially if you got a little bit of bait that's working on it, more than likely you're going to find some fish in one of those particular areas as it patternizes. So make sure that you pay attention to what's really going on with that kind of stuff. All these areas and up in here, there's been very good amount of bait that's been, it's an enormous amount of bait that's been working up and down the shoreline. So you really have to be contend with that. You know, porpoise are all in the area as well. But your baits that you're using, be smart about what you're going to use, because your bait's going to have to stand out amongst all the live bait that's in there and up there on this particular shoreline, all the way down into Spalding and all these other areas that are around there. So be smart about the choice that you, again, the Twisted Tea, original size, the burner size. Again, supermodel for me has not been as productive, but as we head into this new moon that's coming up, it would be something that I would consider throwing. The Double D again, jerk shrimp has been all good. All those baits have worked very well, both free-lined and under popping corks. Again, if you got that dirty water, make sure you got something that's got a little bit of chartreuse, white, or orange on its tail, whatever that may be, your choice. I know there's multiple bait makers that are out there on the market. They all have good baits that are on there. There's none that's just super better than the other. It's just a matter of what you have confidence in. Throw what you are confident in throwing, but these particular baits are all similar. So whether it be a rat tail, wedge tail, paddle tail, whatever, pick one, put it on there, and work with it. Stay with it for a little while. Don't just give up on it after about 10 or 15 casts, because sometimes it takes a little bit. So, again, your majors and minors, incorporate those into the day. Make sure you're paying attention to what the winds are doing. Make sure you're paying attention to really what the tides are doing, because if you're not super familiar with this area up here, as you head toward past Long Reef into Carlos area, there's a bunch of shell bars and shell beds that are up in there. So, something to take in consideration. Make sure that you know where you're going, because you can really hurt yourself, because some of these things, that dirty water happens, and that tide's dropping out of here, then some of those shell bars or whatever can reach up and grab the old scag or the bottom of your boat, and we don't want that. It will not end well for you. So anyway, again, work the hard packed sand, work the guts, work out on the drops out there. Another point of emphasis, look for where your obviously your bait line. Find your bait line where it's at, and up there on this shoreline right now, that's not real hard to locate. So anyway, locate that, work that area, see what your water clarity is. Lots of trout that are up on this shoreline, occasional redfish that are cruising up and down this thing here. Again, the originals and the burner shads have worked and produced the best for me. Again, throw the double D. Double D's been really good there. If you're familiar with how working that, it's a great bait, especially when you're trying to work some edges. It's got the right profile size with the type of bait that's up there in this particular area. Shell point, turtle pin. It's been a little bit since I fished it up in this area, but it was up in there this past week, and all this area up in here has been pretty good. Again, enormous amount of bait that's working back in these areas. This back shoreline, all down through here. Again, pay attention to what your water level is doing, because there's, again, up here in Copano, there's a lot of shell as well. If you're not familiar with that, then you will locate that, unfortunately, the wrong way, and that's not what you want to do. With the water levels being dropped out and being low, you're going to want to push off away from these shorelines. A lot of these areas that we've been fishing, we're fishing depending on the depth of the water as far as how it contours away from the shoreline. We're fishing 100, 150 yards out, because the water level has dictated that to us. So work that, make that some of your target points, some of your areas. These little back lakes that drop off in here have been good. They've been pretty warm, but there's been redfish in there. You come back around here and work these little back lake mouths that are back in this area here. There have been redfish that's been stacked, not stacked, but there have been some that's been in there. We've caught a lot of undersized redfish, so I guess if you're looking at it from that standpoint, yeah, there's a bunch of smaller redfish that have been stacked in these, 16s, 18s, 19s, which looks good for the next foreseeable future as far as, 6-7 months down the road. Those all fish will be ready to go. Toward Copano Creek, this point that's over here, you got this nice deep gut back here in Turtle Pen. This back area has been a really good point, or an area to fish. There's been some redfish that's been hanging out on that particular area as well. But again, the Twisted Tea original and the burner shad have been really good. Chicken of the Sea's been good. White ice has been good. Double D's have been good. Jerk shrimps have been good. All these have been productive baits. Again, even in this area here, the supermodel for me, or the 5-inch version, or whatever you like to throw, it's the same type of thing, has just not been as productive consistently. So that's why we've continued to stay with the original and the burner size, and a little bit fatter profile size like the Double D. Mirror lure, soft dine and mirror dine, throw those on there too. Same thing as what the Double D is. Those are both same stylistic baits. One's an ascending bait, one's a descending bait, so you just make sure that with how you're working your baits in a particular area that you're working, lots of grass back in here, find your deeper edges in your guts and work those descending baits in those particular areas. And if you've got probably crotch deep or just a little bit to your knee deep water, throw that Double D. It's very productive. Find the edge out here off the sandbars that are on these areas here. There's lots of grass that are in here. Double D's been very productive all the way out here to the point of this Turtle Pen area back in here. All this area's been really good. If you haven't fished it very much, it's really underrated. So when you get the right amount of bait, or just bait period, working back in here, conditions set up right, especially for your winds, because Copano can be kind of tricky sometimes. If that wind starts pumping out across there at 15 to 20, 25 miles an hour, so it gets to be a rough little bait system. But when you have the right little winds like we've had over the past week, these areas back here become very productive, and you can find fish back in these areas, not with the gets, just without getting beat up. Again, trout, redfish, occasional flounder back in some of these areas. I've caught the flounder off the burner shads, just kind of bumping that along the edge. If you're a flounder guy, and that's what you like to target with your rod and reel, then the burner shad's a great productive little bait, especially when it's got that chartreuse tail that's on there. You can just ease that thing across the bottom, especially on these areas up here. It's got lots of sand, so you can really locate some fish in there from time to time if you got the patience to do that. Still throwing 16th ounce jig heads. Probably going to start transitioning over to the 1/8 ounce just to give it just a little bit more weight, just a little bit more activity for that particular bait, especially throwing a little bit bigger baits like the original and the supermodel, or whatever 5-inch bait that you like to shoot out across there and throw. So we've got our water temps are hovering to mid to upper 80s, so that bait really is active and really starting to shoot around in there. So something to consider if you're going to change your jig head size. I would not throw anything bigger than that, especially from waist deep water down. You're going to want to keep it around a 16th, nothing more than an 1/8. So always take that into consideration. Always take into consideration your majors and minors, because when you're throwing artificials, the majors and minors are a very key point, and it's very strictly important that you incorporate that in your fishing day for you to continually be productive throughout your day. If you do not incorporate those, you're doing yourself a disservice by not putting those majors and minors somewhere in there. So if you don't know enough about it, contact me, holler at me. I'll be happy to tell you, explain it to you. It's a great thing, especially when you start tracking it from a day in and day out basis. But anyway, these areas up here have been productive for trout, redfish, scattered flounder. Work these areas, be productive with it, be patient with it. You'll locate and you'll get through some fish, but you'll have a good time doing it.
Thanks for watching. I'm Captain Larry Bell.